looked at me and said, "What book?" I said, "Well," and at that instance is when I realized I was doing what was safe, not what was the best thing. And he says to me, he goes, "Ron, you played enough, you've coached it enough to know there are certain times you go for it and certain times you don't." From that point on, that's what I started to do. I started going for it when I felt we had the momentum, we had the personnel to do it, or I punted when I felt our kicker was doing great, our defense was playing hot.
The season you guys went 15-1, I would watch your games, and you dictated the tempo of that game.
Yes.
Every team against every team. You come in here to San Francisco, Super Bowl 50, you go up against the Denver Broncos. Looking back at that team, what was the catalyst of that team? I couldn't put my finger quite on it because they were talented players, but there was something driving them. What was behind that drive?
I think more so than anything else was their confidence and attitude and their belief in what we were doing and how we did it. One of the things that I always try to stress was always talked about culture and talked about core values. And if we could stick to these core values, if we could stick to these ideals, do things the right way, we'll put ourselves in position to win it. And for the most part, we put ourselves in position. We controlled that tempo. We controlled that momentum for the most part. But at the end, it did catch up to us at the very end, because what happened was going into training camp, we lost our number one wide receiver, and people weren't trading number ones. So we had a good crew of receivers, but we didn't have a dominant number one. And that's what Denver exploited against us in the Super Bowl.
2020, you become the head coach of the Washington Redskins. And when I think back on that, I don't even have a question, because I want to ask you what that period of time was like for you, because there was turmoil. There was COVID going on. There was a name change for the Washington Redskins at that time. You had to deal with a major health question.
Well, the biggest thing more than anything else was I went into an area where it was a toxic situation. The culture wasn't what it needed to be. That was one of the hardest things. And then right in the middle of that, we had the George Floyd killing, and then we had the uprising about the name change, and those became really big deals. And there was a refocusing of that, and that's when the name change came in. And then when I was diagnosed with cancer, it changed everything for me personally. But I also understood my focus of the team, and so we announced it. We continued to coach and at the same time be treated. I was going to get treatments every morning for 35 straight days. I received 35 proton therapies and 3 cycles of chemo. And during that, we were right in the middle of the season, and we kept focusing on, as I used to tell the players, be where your feet are, and focus on what's important, not what's interesting. And during that period, when I would go get my treatments, it was all about the treatments. I didn't wonder about anything else. I stayed focused on, getting healthy, taking care of myself. I was very fortunate to a degree that it was COVID, because what happened was getting to the hospital first thing in the morning, there was no rush hour traffic. There was no waiting in line at the hospital. In fact, I come to learn that supposedly there was only one other person that was there before me, and she was on the Supreme Court, and she was getting cancer treatments in front of me. But we never saw her because there's always security in and out, from what I was told. But I would come get my treatments, and then I would focus on getting healthy, and then once that was done, I would go back to the facility, and we would start our day.
Looking forward, and you said to me before we started the interview, you thought you had more football in you, probably from a coaching standpoint, but yet you found yourself coming home, coming to the University of California, being the general manager of their football program. First of all, where the heck did general managers of college football teams come from?
That's something that came up. Our chancellor was wondering about the concept. And so after the ESPN Game Day Miami game, that whole Saturday, Chancellor reached out to my wife. It was right after the Stanford game. She reached out to my wife and said to Stephanie, she said, Stephanie, because Stephanie's on the board of trustees. So he calls her and says, hey, I'd like to talk to Ron. I need to understand a few things about football. I'm really interested in the concept of general manager. And so she says, sure, give Ron a call. So he calls me. He asks me the question, hey, what does an NFL GM do? I said, well, I start to describe it. So then he says to me, how does that translate to college? I said, you know what, Chancellor, I can write you a job description of what it should look like. So I did. I sent it to him, and he reached back out, and we started talking about what this concept looked like. And then come January at some point, he reaches out, and we start talking about the whole concept and idea again. And he says to me, he says, yeah, I talked to some people, and some people have told me, you really need to find a guy to do that job. You need to find someone that could come in and be general manager of Cal's football program, somebody that can be over the top, help direct it, make football decisions, and give credibility to the program again. And I said, great, how can I help you? He goes, well, you're that guy. And that's how it came about. That's how it started. And it was back in January of last season.
It's very interesting because I take a look at college athletics and never thought I'd see the day when we would have NIL money. I would never thought we'd see a portal where you're there 1 year, gone to another school. And it really has hurt, I think, the culture of college football.
Yes.
The alumni being able to relate to the athlete on the field. There's a number of things that are negative about it. We've even had some problems now with college athletes and gambling.
Yes.
Yeah, we knew that was going to come into the whole thing. Is there a path, either one or two or three paths, Ron, that can get a program like you're dealing with, any program that has the challenges of college athletics today, going in a way that everybody is comfortable with it?
There is, but I think a couple things have to take place first and foremost. First of all, so that it gets back to the equity of playing the game, like the NFL. One of the greatest things they've done is they've been able to collectively bargain this situation. We got to figure out how we can do it in college athletics. Secondly, they have a salary cap that is they have to be true to. You have to stay within this salary cap. Okay, that's what revenue share is all about. That's what the judge decided was she believed that there is money that's being made by the NCAA and it should be shared to a degree. And she determined that 20.5 this past season was what should be shared. Okay, so what comes into play is what's called NIL, name, image, and likeness. Well, that comes along. That's the advertising part. That's the marketing portion, okay? And so where I see the problem is this is not true marketing as much as it is finding a way to get money through this window of opportunity to spend on a player is pay to play. If you control how NIL really is, okay, that's the marketing, the advertising aspect of it, then you would stop seeing this large amounts of money being thrown around. That's the truth. Because if you go back and look at in the NFL, I had a salary cap. That's what I got paid. As a player, okay, I got to do commercials. I did a couple commercials. I did a couple TV advertisements. I did a couple newspaper advertisements. And a group of us did an advertisement one time, and this group got paid $5,000. But one guy, the quarterback, got paid $25,000. That's NIL. That's how it's supposed to be. Why? Because of who he is and where he is. To see the money being thrown around, being paid to college kids, and you sit there and go, wait a minute, that guy deserves to get paid more for a commercial than a guy that's been in the NFL for 5 years. That doesn't make sense to me. How can you justify that? So at some point, I think the NCAA, the CSC, the people that regulate what's going on, I think those are the things that need to be challenged. Why? Because if you bring that down to what the value really is, not what somebody says it is, but what it really is in comparison to what's going on in the NFL, I think you can control it. Because to me, what I really want to see is if you stick to that salary cap, I want to see who the great coaches are. That's what I want to see. It's easy to be a great coach when you can outspend everybody and get all the best players. But be a good coach, be a great coach when everything's even. That's what's so impressive about guys like Bill Walsh, okay, that was able to do what he did, but have to do it under the constraints of a salary cap, okay? That to me is important. That to me signifies who great coaches are. Do that when it's like that, not when you are able to buy the best player.
We have a little bit less than 2 minutes left, and I have to ask the big question is, you got the big dogs, the SEC, the Big Ten, and everything. Do you think they will get the message that they have to do what's good for college athletics overall? Because that's the real key. Everybody has their own vested interest.
Well, what's interesting is, and again, when you talk to certain coaches and you talk to certain people in positions of authority at some of these universities in those conferences, they want to see it all equal. They want to see a fair fight. But when they get together and they're amongst themselves, it's like everybody wants, well, what's the advantage? How can we stay ahead of people? It's like people are afraid to do what's right, okay? You do it because it's the right thing to do, not because it's easy or hard. You do it because it's right. If you really want to see just how good you really are, or how are you really spending your money correctly on these individuals, make it fair. Make it a fair fight. You know, as I'm saying, put the guns down and let's use your own physical brawn.
In 45 seconds, what's your goal for Cal's football?
I think to become beyond relevant, to be part of what's going on in the NCAAs, to be able to compete at a high level. And we're doing it not selfishly because it's just all about football, but because it's about the university. We have 29 total sports, 29 Olympic sports. We are one of the pathways to the Olympic teams in America and the Olympic teams internationally because of the international students that compete for the university. That's what we're doing it for. The reason we're doing it for is because if we become relevant and we generate the kind of revenue that can support the entire athletic department, we can have that kind of program that when it's Olympic time, which we're going to see in a few years, several of those athletes from our Olympic teams are going to play for the for the United States. And several of them will play for their home countries internationally.
Ron Rivera, you make so much sense. I'm so glad you're back home and also running the Cal football program there. The things that you said are very, very meaningful, and I think the Cal is in good hands. Let me put it that way. Thank you, my friend.
No, thank you, Ron. Appreciate your time.
Ron Rivera with us, of course, All-American college football player at Cal, also played in the NFL 9 seasons with the Chicago Bears, won a Super Bowl. We continue with more of you in Sports Byline. You want a copy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.